Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Andy Kamenetzky, the handsomer half of the Kamenetzky brothers. That's
damn straight.
The ongoing joke we have here. You know him from Locked On Lakers and ESPN LA Radio. Andy, can we get a yo-yo out of you? That's what the people want in the chat. There we go.
Not only will I give you a yo-yo, I'll give you a boo-ha. Boo-ha.
I love it. I love it. So we're in a celebratory mood because we are past the trade deadline. We have made it. We are a little past 24 hours since the trade deadline concluded, and the Lakers made a move. They ended up flipping Gabe Vincent and a second-round pick for Luka Kennard. They addressed one of, I believe, their three biggest needs going into the deadline in terms of defense, athleticism, three-point shooting. They addressed that in a big way with Luka Kennard as arguably the best three-point shooter in the NBA. He has led the NBA in three-point percentage over the past 5 years, is one of the most efficient jump shooters. If anything, you'd like to see that on a higher volume. That's what JJ Redick was talking about last night, that they want him to shoot even more than he typically does. But Andy, what was your reaction to the deadline? I know a lot of fans were upset that the Lakers didn't trade the first, that they didn't go get a front court starter, but within the self-inflicted constraints that they had of not giving up the first, not trading Rui, not taking back any money, I feel like they did okay. We'll see how much he moves the needle. But what was your reaction to the Kennard deal?
Well, you left out one more constraint, which is they don't have a lot of assets, meaning they don't have spare ones that they can just burn for a win now move, taking into account that this roster is clearly more than one player away or more than one weakness away that you could address to make a deep playoff run. I'm not saying it's impossible, but let's be honest, most teams that are proverbial one move away don't spend the entire season with a negative point differential. Like that's just not how this works. So, and those lack of assets were also self-inflicted wounds, but here we are. Like, this is the reality of where they are. I thought Rob did a good job in terms of bringing in someone like Kennard that you didn't have to give up anything of any assets of long-term value. Like, Gabe was, I think, going to lose his spot in the rotation once Austin gets up to his full minutes anyway. And second-round picks, they matter, they have value, but you can also purchase a second-round pick. Like, if you really need one that badly for some future trade or whatever, like, those are the easiest assets to come by, even though, again, I don't want to downplay their value because they do have value. Kennard, I think, helps them in the short term because this team desperately needs shooting. But it's also, I think, not out of the question that Kennard could be with the team past this season. Like, assuming the number works, he's an impending free agent. Teams in general need shooting, but teams with Luka in particular need shooting. So I wouldn't rule out the idea of Luke Kennard getting re-signed in the offseason, depending on the money and who else the Lakers look to can bring in.
Giannis, right?
Yeah.
Although I've heard that
you need to put some shooting around Giannis, Jovan. Let's be honest.
I've heard that legends don't chase, though; they attract. So,
well, I mean, look, Giannis has no control over this situation anyway. I mean, he's just an employee. Like, ultimately, it's the Bucks that hold all the cards here. Giannis is a guy just punching in, punching out, wearing a name tag like the rest of us. I kind of feel for him, man. I mean, he's got no power and agency in this situation whatsoever. So
this was the obligatory NBA media Giannis part of the show we had to address it.
I believe him that he sincerely, in a perfect world, wants to stay in Milwaukee. And I believe him that he really loves the city. I think everything he's saying there is genuine. But this, I want to stay. I'm 10 toes down for now. I don't know. Like, dude, at some point, man, just pick a direction. Nobody's going to make you a villain. But, like, the Bucks have been doing everything they can to try to put a team around you. And I think Giannis even recognizes that, which in some ways adds to his sense of guilt over all this. At some point, you just have to rip the Band-Aid off, and you definitely can't do it in a way that's like, well, if I end up having to do this, like, what are we going to do? Like, I don't hold all the cards. Yes, you do hold all the cards, because they will never move you unless you say, I want to be moved. So just own it.
Well, my bigger thing, and I don't know if you see this comment here, but I am now Jovan Kamenetzky. I am the third Cambro that you didn't know existed.
Welcome aboard.
My biggest gripe with this all is that, like, so, I mean, there's been the stops and starts with it throughout, going back to last summer, we'll say. But then it's like you have this Shams report come out, and if it really was not true, and if it really was him manufacturing a narrative, manufacturing a storyline, trying to get clicks and attention and views and all this stuff, why not refute it? Why let this be? Because, like, it had kind of died down.
What are you referencing? I'm not sure what you're referencing.
Well, the report last week from Shams that restarting basically the news cycle with Giannis wanting out, and that Giannis had informed the Bucks and had been informing the Bucks over the last few months that he wanted out. And it's like, so that starts this whole new news cycle where now there's additional reporting from ESPN and other national reporters on Giannis and the teams in the mix. And, like, the Bucks are open to it now. The Bucks are taking calls on it. And then it was like in the final 24 hours going into the trade deadline, all of a sudden it starts. You have, like, Giannis doing a couple interviews where he's saying he wants to stay and that he never wanted to leave. Then there was, I think Chris Haynes came out and said, and he's obviously got a close relationship with Giannis, that Giannis never demanded a trade. He never asked out. Then you had the Doc Rivers dunking on Shams and the Bucks account tweeting it out. And it was like, what are we doing here? Like, it feels like they think we have, like, collective amnesia where there was just a big report last week that he wanted out. We saw all the offers coming in, and there was all the respective, like, team reporters talking about what the Warriors are offering, what the Wolves are offering, what the Heat are offering. That was not, like, fake. So why act like, oh, this was never a thing. This was, I was never leaving. I never asked out. It's semantics. It feels like he needs to make a decision and stop, like, dancing around it.
It's semantics. Do I believe him that he does not want to leave Milwaukee? Yes, I actually do believe him. In the same way, I don't think Damian Lillard ever wanted to leave Portland. Like, I think in a perfect world, both of those guys wanted to be lifers with their organization. They both came to realize, I'm not going to get what I want in terms of championship opportunities if I stay here. And I think Giannis is both, it feels like, leaning on semantics, but also trying to leave himself so many outs. Like, remember the interview that he did with Sam Amick, where he starts talking about, I'm happy now, but tomorrow I could wake up and want a different breakfast. Like, we're talking about scrambled eggs. What the F are we doing here? Like, you're trying to talk around this. I mean, honestly, if I were Giannis, the thing I would do is not talk at all. Like, if you, I would just say, look, anything I bring up now, it's just going to make this worse. I'm surprised he talked at all, because he's injured. Like, once you're injured, you have the out, which is what I thought was part of his strategy of eventually letting this get out. Was people now know all of a sudden the Bucks are in business, and Giannis, if he wants to, can avoid any media availability at all, because the NBA CBA rules are, if you're injured, you don't have to be in front of the media. Like, if I were Giannis, I wouldn't be talking at all, because he is not comfortable with this subject. And he, by all accounts, is a great guy. And I think he is a really good human being. He plays his ass off. Like, he's been a pillar of what you'd ever want as a franchise face. Integrity, plays hard, plays elite, like all of that. But the situation may have run its course. And at some point, you just have to own that reality, or say, I'm going to be a lifer, and whatever happens, happens.
I just want clarity. I just want clarity in one direction, and enough with the Wolf of Wall Street tweets. But to bring it back to the Lakers and to bring it back to Luke Kennard,
you're not going anywhere until maybe this summer.
Exactly. Well, and then he's got the extension. I believe he's extension eligible. October 1st, and if he doesn't take it, then we're potentially have a whole off season of like who's chasing him, who's trying to get him, but then like maybe he's not asking out. Then it could all restart the weeks from like media day into the opening night of the season. So I don't think this saga is going anywhere anytime soon. But with regard to Luke Kennard, I think I was asked yesterday a question of like grading the trade. I think I gave the trade a B, and I gave the Lakers a C for the deadline. I said some form of a C, just because I like Kennard, and he's clearly like he's better than Gabe Vincent at one important skill for the Lakers. And right now, I think the version of Gabe we had been seeing lately is sort of I was going to say jack of all trades, but that's like being a little kind. I would say like he just wasn't really contributing in any meaningful way consistently. And he would have maybe the game where he hits a couple threes, but there's a lot of like 1-for-4 performances. And then on top of that, you look at the on-off splits with the Lakers defense, they were getting absolutely lit up with Gabe on the floor, and he had become the preferred target for opposing offenses. And it started to be, well, if Lakers are switching 1 through 4 or even 1 through 5, let's go to the 6'2" guy that our 6'8" wing could just turn and shoot over. So I think there was an element there of like, almost addition by subtraction of taking Gabe out of the rotation, and then you're adding in a player who comes with some real defensive concerns, and I think that's like where my downside is.
Fit right in, baby. Seamless transition to the Lakers.
But the shooting, he will make the shots, right? Like you put Luke Kennard in that Knicks game, he's not part of the 4 for 20 shooting with like Marcus and Jake and Vando, right? So he's going to make some shots, and I think help the Lakers. But overall, I get like the fan base has been upset with this deadline. They were upset before the deadline concluded. They were upset after the deadline. I have seen it on my show. I'm sure you've seen it on your show, and I get it. If we're grading it through the lens of like what the fan base wanted, I understand why some people want to give them an F, and some people are like throw everybody out, fire everybody, get rid of them. But if we're being like objective as to what the Lakers' actual objectives were, that's where I give them probably like a C, where it's like you kind of did the bare minimum. The absolute minimum, in my opinion, you could do was like upgrade the back end of the roster. I would have honestly preferred to have given up. It's going to be crazy after last night's performance, but like I would have preferred Maxey or Dalton going out, just because I still think Gabe was like the better player of those three. Although maybe Maxey's game last night was better than like Eddie Gabe had this season, but like in theory, it was just like he was the best of the three. He had the most value, and that was the guy that they traded. But like I don't know, I felt it was a fine deadline, like through that lens, right? I was of the mindset I wanted to trade the first. I wanted to add a front court starter, but that did not seem to be a realistically achievable goal for LA.
I don't really know what they could have done that would have moved the needle anyway that was worth it. Like, who's an example of somebody that you're talking about? You know what I mean? Like what I did not want them to do.
I think Andrew Wiggins and Nick Claxton were gettable. Now I know they're both polarizing figures to some.
Claxton,
I'm much higher on the Claxton fit.
Wiggins, absolutely not. I'm not giving up.
That's fair.
I'm not giving up a first for a guy that's already in his 30s that you might end up having to re-sign in order to justify giving up the first form in the first place. I don't want a guy who one of his specialties is point of attack defense as he's moving into his 30s. I don't want that for a team that is being built around a 27-year-old star. For me, Wiggins was a non-starter for the first. I would have been more upset if they did do that. My basic thing for the deadline, and I will say the Lakers met my standard. Any move they made or did not make needed to be prioritizing the future with Luka over this season. If you could make a move that could be part of Luka's future moving forward, where you start building next season's team now, awesome. I would be 100% in favor of that. Any move that prioritized this season, even 1% over the future with Luka, I think is a mistake, because ultimately this team has too many flaws to paper over. for a deep playoff run. And it's ultimately going to take them becoming the best version of themselves, like the best sum of their parts, than whatever they could do with Rui in a first. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to be able to make that type of impact move anyway. And this season, to me, is not worth that. Like, we haven't even gotten enough of Luka, LeBron, and Austin together to build momentum anyway, even counting whatever holdover from last season. I think it would have been a mistake to try to prioritize some type of run this year. I think it would have honestly felt more like of a performative, we are messaging to the fans, we're serious. I don't want that. Like, you finally have an opportunity in front of you to build with some flexibility, with some optionality around a generational superstar. That's your path forward. That's the thing that matters. This season, try to win as many games as you can. Try to go as far in the playoffs as you can. This season is not the one to invest in.
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with you. I think I'm higher on Wiggins aging, I think, maybe than consensus. Like, I think he's still a pretty good player who has developed into an above average 3-point shooter who I think from a shot quality perspective, playing off of Luka, Austin, LeBron, would be getting some great looks. And I think it still continues to be like the Lakers have this whack-a-mole with their lineups where their best defenders are inconsistent and sometimes just flat out bad offensively, and their best offensive players are inconsistent defensively and sometimes just flat out bad defensively. And it's like JJ has to be like the perfect scientist to find the exact formula for a given night of it's got to be these two players with these two players. And like, it's a challenge that I think some of the other top rosters in the league don't have to deal with, where there's just a level of versatility and two-way play up and down the roster that you can mix and match some of the combinations without it being potentially disastrous. So I felt Wiggins could, because I think like in general, we're seeing now with the new CBA, rosters kind of go through like a 2 to 4 year cycle, right? Depending on, like, you're kind of lucky if you're on the 4-year cycle. So I felt like Wiggins, if this is a potentially like a 2 to 3 year life cycle of the next iteration of the Lakers, I think he could have fit into that. But like,
but once you start getting into 2 or 3 years, then you're talking about his new contract. Like, at that point, You're talking about re-upping with Wiggins. I don't want to do that.
It's fair. I also think, and we could just pivot now to 2026. Like, so depending on what they do with some of these contracts, and there's a lot of moving parts, you have Austin first and foremost, and the Lakers are going to likely re-sign him to some sort of max contract, whether that's at, I would say 37 is probably the floor, but it could somewhere between 37 to 42.5 starting out next season. Then you have LeBron and the uncertainty with his future. Is he even playing next season? Does he want to be in LA? Is he willing to take a pay cut? Does he want to go elsewhere? A lot of moving parts. You got the player options, DA and Marcus. You have Rui, who is extension eligible through June 30th. And the fact that the Lakers didn't trade him seems to indicate to me that there's at least some interest in either extending him or re-signing him. So we got a lot of moving parts here. Then you got like Vando, who's under contract, and DK, who clearly they were trying to trade DK and no one would take DK even as like a second round value. It was pretty grim. You got his $4 million under contract. So like they have a lot of moving parts here with the cap sheet going into the summer, but we could tentatively say somewhere between ballpark like 50 to 60 million. And that is in a, like, assuming they just keep Austin at his cap hold and depending on how some of these things play out, we'll ballpark at 50 to 60 million. What would you like to see them do with that 50 to 60 million? Because on paper, cap space is sexy. It's a nice term, but you actually have to go do something with that cap space. They will have 2 first-round picks plus the 2026 pick that they could draft on behalf of another team or just draft a player and then end up flipping that. I like making that distinction because they don't actually have 3 first-round picks.
No, you're the first person I've heard bring this up and frame it that way, and it's a very good observation.
Yeah, so and technically it's all on like draft day, right? Because they don't get access to trade the 2026 pick until draft day. They also don't get access to the 2033 pick until draft day. So they have this short window on draft day to have the 3 picks and then decide. You can, I've talked to some people about this. You can technically, if you were putting those picks on the table for Giannis or just for another player, you could agree with Milwaukee, hey, we're going to draft, you agree to the trade, and then the second free agency starts, you execute the deal. Like we see draft day deals that don't get executed until free agency all the time. So you could theoretically do something like that. But what would you like to see them do with the 50 to 60 million plus 2 picks and an asterisk pick, we'll say?
In a perfect world, what I'd like to see them do is build as much depth as they can, address as many of the needs that you need around a Luka-centered team in general, which is athleticism, which is defense, which is shooting, which is speed. Like, try to, if possible, offset the things that Luka doesn't do, particularly, or that aren't his strengths, particularly when it seems like they're going to bring back Austin and Luka, offensively at the very least, I think play off each other very well. They supplement each other very well. They seem to have a really good chemistry, both on and off the court. But the biggest concern I have about locking up Luka and Austin as the foundation is I think it is difficult to build a championship team where your 2 best players, or possibly your 2 highest paid players, in no way either offset each other's weaknesses or are different players. Like Luka and Austin are way more alike than disalike. And I would argue that there's really nothing that one brings to the table, like in particular Austin brings to the table, that Luka doesn't already bring to the table. And there can be a big upside to doubling and even tripling down on strengths. But that means I think you need to use the rest of your draft picks, your salary cap space, all of that stuff to try to build in a way that offsets those weaknesses. And you're trying to supplement around those guys. I think they need to be very conscious of the idea and very active with the idea of using that cap space to trade into, as opposed to just looking for free agents. They have to be careful with the way they go about targeting restricted free agents, because you're going to have to outbid another team. And for at least, like a couple days, that money's frozen. So there can be opportunity costs in terms of who else you can't get. And regardless, they're going to make the Lakers wait it out. So, a guy like Trey Murphy III, for example, I would be more than happy with the idea of the Pelicans finally coming to their senses and realizing, like, this ain't it. And we should really try to put ourselves in the best position to build around Queen and Fears. I would be more than happy with you using a chunk of, or maybe even all of those picks or swaps or whatever to bring in someone like Trey Murphy, because he is at the right age to go with Luka and Austin. He brings certain things to the table that they do not. He's not an elite defender, but he is certainly a better defender than either one of them. He is a great scorer. He is a great shooter. He brings athleticism and more speed and certain elements of dynamic play that those guys won't. I would be looking for things like that. Part of the concern I have with the Giannis as not just plan A, but like we're going to treat this waiting it out like we did with Kawhi 6 years ago, is Giannis's age and the increasing injuries. And he is still a great player when he's healthy, but he's starting to deal with more injuries. I have concern about the way his game is going to age, because it's so hinged on athleticism and he doesn't have a consistent outside shot. Like I have concerns about that. Also, you would end up devoting so much of your cap space towards Giannis at that point, in a league that is increasingly about not just speed and athleticism and size, but also depth. Like, depth is really important. And I think the Lakers need to be thinking more expansively about the entirety of how they're building a roster, as opposed to who are the most obvious names we can get. Like, who are the big, like, doesn't take a genius to identify, yeah, Giannis would be pretty awesome on your team. great. Hire me for that. I guarantee I cost less than Rob. But like the pieces you're going to put around them matter a lot. And Rob Pelinka at this point has no more excuses. Like there is no more kicking the can down the road because you've got flexibility. You've got at least a few picks. You have the superstar that you want to build around. And I think the dirty little secret of the last few years with the can kicking and, the platitudes about flexibility and first round picks and, we're going to be aggressive is the last couple of years, they did not believe in LeBron and AD as a duo. They didn't as a foundation. It was transparently clear they didn't. Agree with them, disagree with them, whatever. It was very clear they didn't want to invest in it any further. And I think they were using that a lot as platitudes to keep the fan base placated while really not wanting to do anything, but also not knowing what the hell they were going to do, how they were going to pivot out of it until Luka landed in their laps. Now they have a guy that they should be wanting to completely invest in. We should start getting strong indications of how Rob Pelinka would do this on his own. And the runway is shorter and the can kicking is now non-existent. So that's another thing you need to see this offseason is action. Soliloquy over.
Well, I think you're underrating the ability to kick the can down the road. I think they have mastered that art form.
But I think I do think, in fairness to Rob, even if you disagree with his assessment of LeBron and AD and the worthiness of continuing to invest, the context is dramatically different now. Like it is dramatically. And again, whether you agree or disagree with Rob's assessment before or the franchise's assessment, Genie's assessment, whatever, it is different now. And I think if for no other reason to try to at least give Rob some benefit of the doubt, what he's about to step into this summer is not the same old. Like it is contextually different. So he should now. It is.
I think it's more so I think there's been a lot of empty promises the last few years.
Oh, there have been.
And I felt like they've kind of been in this purgatory for basically since they got out. Well, I mean, they were in the Russ purgatory, and then since they got out of the Russ purgatory, they've been in this just like good but not good enough purgatory, and they've done just enough to maintain a 50-ish win team that if the bracket breaks right, they can make the Western Conference Finals like in 2023, but like more often than not, they're more of a first round exit, and they've just been in this like no man's land that even despite getting Luka Doncic and getting this golden off ramp into the next era of the franchise, they're still kind of in the same position in general of up to this point of the season, I think actually last year's team has probably been better than this year's team. I know the record has actually been better, but you were mentioning it earlier, like net rating, point differential. Last year's group had a stretch pre-Luka trade and post-Luka trade.
They were on negative point differential watch the entire season. Like we did that on Locked on Lakers. We did a daily negative point differential.
I mean, it's kind of, I guess it's, but like point being, it's like they're not in like a dramatically. I don't think that even if you want to argue this year's team is better, I don't think there's like a dramatic difference in my opinion between now we'll see how the final 32 games go, right? And we're at the 50 game mark here, and the Lakers are 31-19, and they have been playing better lately. Over the past 10, they're 7-3. They're 8th in offensive rating, 11th in defensive rating, 7th or 8th in net rating overall. So this is like the first stretch of the season they've actually been sort of in that top 10 on both sides. It's often been the yo-yoing, no pun intended, of often top 10 offense, top bottom 10 defense, but then like they've had a couple stretches where they've actually been good defensively, and then they've been awful or like average-ish to below average offensively, which I think for their standards should be awful. But I'm with you. Like I think my concern with this offseason is I just think there's a lot they have to do, and like they do have a lot of flexibility to execute it, but I think so like there's just different versions of it okay, so you get Giannis, let's just say hypothetically, and my understanding is they want to keep Austin out of that So the goal would be Luka, Giannis, and Austin as a big three. But then you're going to have one. We'll see like who's still on the roster that you maybe they have to dump some guys, maybe that whatever. But let's just say there's like a few. Vando's still on the roster, Jake's on the roster, DK's on the roster, Adu. Those are the guys who are still under contract. And then you're going to have one exception, and then you're going to have a bunch of minimum guys. And like, if you look at the track record with the minimum guys the last few years, it has been pretty grim and just like by nature, minimum guys are a crapshoot. They've had a lot of misses, I would say, with the minimum guys. And specifically with like the things that I think they would need, which are rim running athletic bigs and two-way wings. I don't have confidence in them nailing those on the minimum market. So I just look at that, or I look at even if they get a restricted free agent, let's say they overpay to get Peyton Watson or Walker Kessler. Now you get the one starting upgrade. You have like 20 million left to play with to now potentially add another starter and like add some bench depth. They're going to have to like get very creative here. And I think nail talent evaluation in a way that they have not done so consistently over the past 5 years. So like that's where some of my skepticism comes in, is like they have to do something this offseason that they have not done a good job of for basically 5 years. And I think it's natural to feel some skepticism of that, of like, they could have been doing some of these things in the past and they did not. So I don't see why all of a sudden, other than maybe the pressure, it's going to suddenly change. Like I don't see where the brand new talent evaluation is going to come in, right? Other than you kind of have to nail it.
Well, I didn't say to be optimistic. I said I
That's
think
fair.
contextually this changes. Like it's a different, as far as the way Rob did or did not approach certain things. Because again, I think over the last couple seasons of LeBron and AD, Jeannie Buss, the franchise in general, they lost their confidence in what they could get from the LeBron AD core and did not want to seriously invest in it any further. Again, agree with it, disagree with it. For this talking point, it's beside the point. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. That was obvious. And that was holding them back from doing certain things. Also, if we're being honest, it is very difficult to make significant changes when $50-ish million of your cap is occupied by one guy with a no trade clause, like for several years running. Like that in and of itself interferes with a lot of the moves that you could make. You know, and once, honestly, people don't think about this. Once Bronny was put on the roster, it's more like about 54 or so, because Bronny was essentially untradeable as long as LeBron, they weren't going to trade Bronny by himself. So that is a small amount of money that you couldn't even use to make the salaries work in a trade. Like it is difficult to really make big moves when $50-ish million of your cap is basically off limits. And then you've got Anthony Davis, who at the time they weren't going to trade. And the other issue that I think the Lakers had was, for a while, they didn't believe in this core, but they frankly didn't have the stones to just move on, because this organization
that's kind of what, that's
this
part
organization
of my gripe with all this.
Doesn't know what to do with themselves unless they have stars. But again, that context has all changed. They have a star that they believe in now in his prime. So, and they have more flexibility. It's not perfect, but they have more flexibility to try to start building around Luka. I don't expect this offseason to magically transform the Lakers into the front runners to win a championship, because I don't think that's realistic. But the way I would judge this offseason as a success or a failure is, A, does the team look better? But B, do you see a direction with what they're building? Like, when the dust has settled, do you understand what they did? And does it make sense? And that to me is a success. If you feel like they took tangible steps forward, then it was a success. If it feels like it's basically Luka, Austin, and a fair amount of indecision or uncertainty or lack of clarity, then Rob F this thing up. There's no way around it at that point.
Yeah, I even though like I think we're largely in agreement. I think my like one pushback in as I've thought like more about this in general and like some of the comments. Like I even go back to the end of the 2025 season after the Minnesota loss, and there were comments about someone I forgot who asked about LeBron and how LeBron felt about the roster and sort of like sending LeBron off on a high note. And Rob talked about, well, yeah, like we know LeBron's going to have high expectations for the roster and we're going to do everything we can to deliver. And then it's like, well, you can't say they did everything they can to deliver in the past 2 trade cycles. Like I
said they didn't do everything.
No, I'm not saying.
I made it very clear they didn't.
No, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying like that was factually incorrect. That they went bargain bin hunting in the summer. They did not flip the first. They did not get off some of the, like they could have flipped Gabe Vincent or Maxi Kleba in the summer to open up other avenues to improve the roster. They chose not to because they didn't want to attach any assets. And then they went into this season and ultimately, I mean, they made I think a nice small move, but like didn't make any substantial moves. And I just think now we're talking about if things play out in a way that I think you and I both view as realistic, you're kind of going to be 2.5 years into the Luka tenure, and you might have like 1 second round exit to show for it in 3 postseasons. And that's where my concern is.
I don't consider that first half season, or even in a lot of ways where we are now. I'm not counting that part as much, not to carry water for Rob, but just realistically, they went from all of a sudden having a team that was being kind of half-heartedly built around Anthony Davis and LeBron to having Luka and trading out in AD and Max Christie, the exact type of pieces that ideally you'd want to put around Luka in the first place. Like in a perfect world, you would have traded LeBron instead of AD and Max to keep, to put those pieces around Luka. Like I'm giving them some degree of grace just because I don't think it is realistic to expect that quick of a transformation. Like, to put this in perspective, in 2004, after the Lakers lost to the Pistons in the finals, they dismantled the Kobe Shaq core. Kobe, they obviously kept Kobe. Shaq went to Miami. You get Lamar Odom, Caron Butler, who becomes Kwame Brown, who becomes Pau Gasol. It took that group from 2004 to 2008 to get into the finals, and that was with prime Kobe and Lamar Odom, who was a pretty damn good player. Like, this stuff takes time. Like the fact that you have Luka in his prime, or that the Lakers, their platitude is we always compete for championship. Great, whatever. I don't care. That's not how the world works. Like, I'll be honest. I've stopped giving a shit what they say years ago. I've covered this team for too long. They say every year they're competing for a championship. They said that while it was Kobe post Achilles and like Ronnie Price and Carlos Boozer. Like, no, like you're not.
Tarek
or
Black,
when it was with it was with
Wayne
the kids
Ellington
or whatever. Like I don't care what they say. And to be fair to them, they did not message a lot heading into this season, championship or bust. Like, they really didn't. But there was a little bit
like I think you're providing important context, which I think is like necessary. I wasn't even talking like from a context perspective. I was just talking from a factual perspective. I think you could be 2.5 years into this and it's like you maybe have not gotten out of the first round, or maybe you got out of the first round once, and it just feels like
that was the same thing that happened with Kobe, and then they eventually got to the finals and won a championship. I mean, you're talking about literally the same timeline.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know. I also don't think anyone or the other teams in the West are going anywhere to like. Sure. I think OKC is going to be OKC for the next 4 to 5 years. I think San Antonio has a 4 to 5 year runway. I think Houston will eventually have to replace KD, but like they're not going anywhere. Minnesota is going to have theoretically Ant for the. So it's like. And I think those teams all have better infrastructure right now. So
they do.
I guess I would just say I would like a little bit more urgency. It feels like they might be more on your timeline, which is like if they're looking at trying to do this in 2029. I think you're mismanaging Luka's prime.
But that's not what I want to do either. I'm not looking to make this or think I'm not defending them if their plan is.
I'm still here. My camera's been
that's fine.
overheating because I've been streaming so much. Hopefully it turns.
So it's okay. There you go. So it's clear. I'm not proposing like a 5-year window before contention or anything like that. All I'm saying is the way the world realistically works, particularly from the situation that they were in. I don't expect them to have realistically, from last February to this February, transform what they were working with into a championship roster. Like I don't think
I
that's
agree.
realistic.
I agree. I guess I would just say it doesn't feel like
you need to be making tangible progress this summer.
I would probably before we'll give a quick grade and then go into the Q&A here because I do have a hard out in about 20-ish minutes, 25. This to me feels like maybe a B or B minus start to the Luka era from a roster perspective. Like it just feels like, and I know they've had this big, like we want the 2026 offseason. So again, I think we're in agreement that you got to nail it then. Like there's no excuses. There's no more kicking the can. There's you have to nail it. It feels like we've seen it. Like, they did the Mark Williams trade, that they rescinded it. Okay. The offseason, they did the absolute, in my opinion, bare minimum of just we're using the exceptions we have. We're not trading anybody. We're not putting any draft capital either to acquire somebody or to get off some of these bad contracts. And I think if you got off Maxey or Gabe in the offseason, there would have been players who could have been real rotation pieces, even on a minimum, that would have helped more.
Who do you think they could have gotten?
Off the top of my head, it's hard to say. Like I know, like to go back 2 summers, Gary Trent was interested in coming, and they did not want to waive. Now, this is a small, but they didn't want to waive Christian Wood or Cam Reddish because they didn't want to eat the money. And Gary Trent had interest in coming. They decide not to do that. They inevitably have to waive Christian Wood and Cam Reddish both during the season. And Gary Trent had a very solid season for Milwaukee as a minimum player. And it was like, those are the types of decisions where I just feel like sometimes they miss the fine print and the details with how to build a roster. But and like even now, the back end players 11 to 14, you look at their 11 to 14 versus any of the other contenders, it's like not even comparable at all. But I don't know. I would say this has probably been a B or B minus for me.
I'd give them a B for the deadline or whatever. B-ish. That's fine.
Not I'm not talking deadline. I'm just talking like the overall Luka experience up to this point with the roster building.
B-ish. I mean, I think it's B-ish, but again, I did not expect as much immediate activity. But again, this offseason is where things really begin. And look, Rob made a ton of mistakes between when he first got this job and where we are now. Like if you're asking me, do I believe in Rob Pelinka as a team builder? The answer is no. But that's, in a lot of ways, to me, these are separate questions than what should they have done now. Like, if you're asking me, do I think the Lakers should be looking to replace Rob Pelinka, at the very least, be open to it? But that's a separate question than did he screw up the deadline? Fair.
All right, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Sarah Talks Ball. Giannis, babe, I'm going to leave my wife for you. Hey, he might wake up one day and just have feel a little differently, and that's a human thing. I get that argument of it, but it feels like he's waking up every day and just saying, "I want to stay, I want to leave," and then he gets upset when people are acting accordingly.
What do you think Mrs. Giannis felt about being dragged into this?
She's been dragged into it a little bit here. I wouldn't feel great, but I also
can tell you Mrs. Amby wouldn't appreciate it.
They got a beautiful family. They got a beautiful life. I think it's going to be okay. Average Dad, thank you for the super chat. Why pay AR so much if no other team has space? This has been on my mind because several of the big cap space players have lost their cap space going into the summer after some of the moves at the deadline. So I look at a team like Utah. I had heard and others have reported that Utah was interested in offering Austin a max offer and trying to push the Lakers and see if the Lakers would match that, and Lakers could obviously surpass it. But I think there's just an element here of like operating in good faith and not try like. I think if you lowball Austin and say like, hey, no one can pay you more than 30, we're going to offer you 31. I think Austin then just says peace out, and like some team will create the space. Like there are teams that can create more cap space if they really need to get off money, attach something, and then sign Austin. So it's definitely affected the market. Like the market's different now than it was 48 hours ago. But I think just from like an operational, maybe you could squeeze out a little bit from him, but I don't think there's some drastic, like here's $30 million, take a $12 million pay cut.
They've gone this far with Austin and they've had opportunities to trade him and they've always kept him. You don't want to go this far to botch the negotiations. Like don't turn this into a long-term version of not hiring Ty Lue.
I was going to say that they've done the botched negotiations before and it didn't work out. Andre Miller, thank you for the super chat. In other words, Rob sabotaged the Braun era on purpose. What do you think of that?
That's not what I mean. I don't think he sabotaged it. I mean, he did help build a team that won a championship with LeBron, and the season after the pandemic, I actually think Rob put a pretty good team around them. He made a drastic mistake with the Russell Westbrook deal, and that is on Rob and Jeannie, because even though LeBron and AD, well documented, wanted it, it's on them to evaluate it as a good idea. And if they don't like it, say no, because ultimately LeBron and AD cannot call in a trade to the league office. It's on them. And like I said, I think after that, they just decided that they didn't want to invest in it anymore. I don't consider that sabotaging LeBron, though. There's a difference.
Yeah, I know that there's been this conspiracy theory out there that because Rob was Kobe's agent and Kobe and LeBron had their rivalry, that I've seen some people suggest that Rob has tried to directly sabotage LeBron's career so he couldn't win more championships than Kobe or tie Kobe. I disagree with that. I do think there will be a 30 for 30 and there will be, I know there's already been a book or a couple books on the Russ situation, but I really think that is going to go down as one of the most disastrous trades in NBA history. I mean, I think it already is, but like, I think it was more so the damage it did to a championship. Like a lot of times, like you see, I think about the Celtics Nets, right? Like perfect example of a disastrous trade back in 2013. But like KG and Pierce were on their way out of being stars, and like they were no longer the same players they were earlier in the Big Three, tenure. And it was like Brooklyn was trying to be relevant. So that was sort of, there's a lot of like bad trades with trying to be relevant. The Lakers had a championship core. They potentially could have gone on another deep playoff run if AD doesn't go out against Phoenix in round one. They completely dismantled that with the Russ trade, and they were never the same from then, both on and off the court. And there were, the fracture that developed between the Lakers and Clutch just was never the same after that. So that was such a disastrous trade that I think that trade was more so the thing that they just never were able to fully get on the same page again.
No, it shut the window for all intents and purposes for LeBron and AD that era, because even though they pivoted out of it reasonably well, like I think if Miles Turner was truly an option, which had been reported before it was eventually the three-way deal involving D'Lo and Vando and Malik Beasley, I think Rob should have made a trade for Miles Turner because he was by far the best player they were ever linked to. But like all things considered, they pivoted out of that reasonably well. But you don't get that time back. Like they lost a couple prime seasons of LeBron and AD. And again, I put that, the narrative is everyone putting that on LeBron and AD and Clutch for pushing for it. And obviously they deserve a share of the blame. To me, the bigger share is always going to be on Rob and Jeannie, because at best they just agreed and miscalculated. Like they were in agreement with LeBron and AD that this was a good idea, Russ, and they were all wrong. Or worse, they knew it was a bad idea, but didn't have the stones to tell LeBron and AD no. And that's actually way worse. Like it's way worse to knowingly make a bad trade because you're too scared to say anything to your stars, as opposed to just making a mistake. But the bottom line, to me, the lion's share of that mistake falls on Rob and Jeannie, because they're the ones who say yes.
Enigma 2004 says, please collab more often. This is such analysis. I promise we will collab when my camera is not crashing out here.
Thank you.
I apologize. Should I just be a black box for the entire time?
It's different. It's kind of artsy.
This is, it shouldn't be overheating the way it has been, but I did 5 hours of content yesterday, so I think it's good. Enigma follows up. Number one, what would you both say is the likelihood of Braun leaving? Two, how can or should the Lakers make up for what they lose offensively and defensively with him off the team for the 2026-27 season? What are your answers to these two questions?
It feels to me like this is LeBron's last season with the Lakers. I feel like the relationship between LeBron and Clutch with the organization, it's run its course, like mutually on both sides. I don't gather that it's like hostile or ugly, but it's felt like both sides have been ready to move on from each other for a couple seasons, and neither one just had a better option. At the very least, now the Lakers have a better option with Luka, and that's clearly the exit ramp that they're going to take. I wouldn't rule it out altogether that LeBron could return, but I would be at this juncture, I'd be surprised, because it really does feel like both sides are just ready to be done with each other.
What's really interesting with this is I looking at the market and just sort of what's out there. The Lakers might actually be able, well, not even might, like they can offer him the most money, but like even at a discount, they still might be able to offer significantly more than any of the other realistic suitors, where like realistic landing spots for LeBron. So I think that's an interesting thing here, where if he really wants out, I think it's going to probably come at a significant, like he's probably already taking a significant haircut next season, but
that's happening
even more so if he's leaving. Whereas like with the Lakers, maybe there's something $20 million. Like I don't know what that number is. It also depends on like what they get, because if you get Giannis, it's really tough to keep LeBron at a certain number. If you kind of strike out, or maybe you get like one big piece, you still have some flexibility there to potentially keep him. So it kind of depends on how things play out. But I'm with you in that I think there's an over 50%, greater than 50% chance he is not back next season.
If I'm being honest too, they need to be more forward thinking in how they build this roster than with LeBron. I mean, he doesn't really fit with a forward building plan. Like at this stage of his career, like I never say never, I guess. And, LeBron, I don't think LeBron's washed, but he's not the same impact player towards winning that he used to be. Like he just isn't. He does not regularly impact winning. It's amazing that he still can produce at the level he does. And there are times where he absolutely, last night against the Sixers, his fourth quarter was a big part of them winning that game, but he does not at will impact winning on a game in, game out basis the way that he used to. I also think too, if it's his last season, do you really want to be trying to mix trying to win a championship with all the storyline of, is this LeBron's retirement? If we know it's LeBron's retirement, the goodbye in every city, like that's a lot to juggle for a team that's also trying to win a championship.
And to your point, I just think ultimately, like it's unfortunate, because I think we all probably would have liked a better end to the LeBron chapter in LA. And if they end up losing in round one or round two, I think that's just, it's unfortunate that like, I think there was so much potential with this partnership, and they still won a championship, but like it felt like they could have done even more. But to your point, like the Lakers, some future version of the roster, whether it's next season, the season after that, at some point in the next 2 years, let's say, the Lakers will have a version of this team that does not have LeBron, And I do feel like the sooner they can get there, the better, just from like the next era and building the continuity, right? Because like LeBron is such a big piece that you're going to need to learn how to play without him at some point. And if they keep this going another year, another 2 years, you're almost delaying whatever the next version of this team is going to look like. So it's not even like an anti-LeBron thing, or LeBron doesn't fit, or he's not good. Because I know people take it that way when you say certain things. It's not that. It's just like he will not be here in 2027 or 2028. And the Lakers need to build a team that like leads into that version of the team being a true contender who can play with OKC and San Antonio. As for making up for him, it's going to be tough. I mean, I think that the guy that stands out among all the options is like, I really like Peyton Watson. Yeah. That would be someone I'd be throwing an aggressive offer at and trying to see if you could poach him from Denver. But there's no, I mean, they're not getting another LeBron, right, on next year's team. So it's like, it's going to have to be a collective effort to replace LeBron, right? No one, no singular player is going to do it. But the playmaking, the scoring, the downhill, the post ups, all that stuff, like it's going to have to be a group effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next one from Alicia Clark Jones. Appreciate it. Why would a superstar want to come to the Lakers if they've seen how the front office did LeBron and AD?
I don't know if they necessarily did him that badly. I mean, they traded Anthony Davis for a star 6 years younger than him. Good luck finding another team that wouldn't do that. I mean, these guys are in the league. They know this is how it works. Anthony Davis forced his way out of New Orleans because he wanted a better option too. I don't think they did either one of them dirty. They drafted LeBron's son. Like they put LeBron's son on his, like at some point, like you have to acknowledge they did things for both of these guys. They kept giving LeBron up until recently the type of open-ended contract that he wanted with these 1+1s and no trade clauses that are difficult to build around. They're in a lot of ways difficult to give LeBron what he wants. Do I think they did as good of a job building around those two as they should have? No, but that's more about incompetence than it is doing them dirty. There's a big difference.
Yeah, I don't know. I would go so far as to say they did them dirty, but I do think that. So I think there's the contract side of this too, where like they always played ball with whatever type of contract LeBron or AD wanted up until they didn't want. Like I think an underrated factor of the whole AD Luka trade. Like you make that trade 10 out of 10 times, regardless of the other circumstances or factors. But they were coming up on the extension date for AD, and we're not thrilled about potentially offering him that extension. But they played ball on the money side, and they did play ball, obviously drafting Bronny and actualizing that dream for LeBron. I would say though, I don't think they handled the end of that era the best, because it felt like they were talking out of both sides of their mouths. Or it was more so a lot of talking and a lot of inaction. And I don't know that LeBron or AD, if another star came to them, would exactly give a raving review about this experience and how the front office stuff has gone and some of the because those guys have. I don't agree with a lot of the moves they've wanted, but like my big pushback has been, going back to last season, that I did some interviews and one of my things was like, yes, they did draft Bronny, but that was like in totality, that was a low stakes move.
See, I disagree with that. At the time, they had no roster spots to spare, and they used a roster spot on a guy that they knew would not be ready. And in any other season, they trade that draft pick. They don't use it. So
or they just don't even sign, or they don't just they draft someone, they don't sign them.
You can't complain about the back end of the roster, but then say it's a low stakes move to put a guy on a roster that can't play when you don't have the spots to spare simply because he's LeBron's kid. And so it's clear. The nepotism piece of that, I couldn't give a shit less about that. Like whatever. Connections are how things work. I don't care about any of that. Bronny, by all appearances or my interactions with him, anything I ever hear, he's a hard worker. He doesn't demand a lot.
He's great.
He's
awesome.
Bronny's the least of the problems in any of this. And if they'd done it in a different year, I don't think it would have mattered. But that particular year, there was an impact from it. Like, they were making a sacrifice to do this for LeBron. And you have to at least acknowledge that. Like, especially at a time when LeBron's like, I want to win now, win now, win now, but also use that roster space on my son that we know is not ready to play. Like, and these are sacrifices that LeBron ultimately was okay with.
Yeah, I guess I still think it was a relatively low, just because you also had other players on the team. Like, I guess a couple things could be true. Like it was a sacrifice, but I also, when I'm looking at like Christian Wood and Cam Reddish on the roster, I'm like, those are not NBA players, and those guys were quickly out of the NBA. And I'm like,
but at the time when they signed Christian Wood, remember, at the time, people thought that was actually a boon for the money.
I was not one of those people.
Most people, though. The overwhelming consensus was that's pretty good for a veteran's minimum.
Yeah, but not at that time. I thought the ship had kind of sailed. He was injured. I mean, that was another thing, right? Like I think part of the reason why he's out of the league is he just never got, or it took him a while to get healthy. I don't know. I guess my point where I was going to go with it is I think, if that's the biggest thing they did, I also think there was a lot they did not do, and that's more so where I felt like because LeBron and AD wanted them to make a bunch of trades every single season that they just ultimately never made. Now, I personally disagree with a lot of the players that they wanted them to go after.
But that's more Rob so actually from doing like a good job, though.
That is, but I just think from a star experience, more so it's like they try to brand themselves or frame it as like we're the star first organization, and I don't think that's actually been the reality here.
I mean, as I get kicked out. You can be star first without necessarily doing it's impossible to do every single thing they ask. Like, if that's the definition of being superstar friendly, then it's an unreasonable, like, definition.
All right. Oh, now we got a new angle here. This is my camera angle. All right, here we're back. All right, we got two more questions here, then we're going to wrap. Bernardo, thank you for the super chat. Would you have the Lakers betting on this upcoming draft class of centers and try to offer the most to Kessler in free agency?
I don't know the class of centers. I can't answer.
Yeah, I don't know the class of centers as well. I was talking about it earlier today on Lakers Collective. Like we were talking about, should the Lakers try to keep the 2026 pick and just use it as a form of cheap, underpriced labor and just like that roster spot being valuable. I will say, I think it depends on who they draft, and they need to not draft another offensive-minded guard who does not play defense. They need a 3-and-D wing or a rim-running center. It needs to be one of those two things because this is not a hindsight thing. Like, even going back to what the roster looked like at the time, they still needed better center play around AD, and then also 3-and-D wings, and they passed up on those types of guys for JHS and Dalton. So I would say, if they're keeping the pick, I like a center archetype because I think that's better than what they've done the last couple drafts. I'm extremely high on Walker Kessler. I would pay a large amount of money to sign him, and I would also consider sweetening, an offer potentially of a sign and trade with a couple picks going to Utah. Like that's how high I am on Kessler. So
I don't think they're going to get rid of him though. I've never thought they're going to part ways with him.
I mean, apparently Indiana threw the Zubats package at Utah for Kessler first, and they declined that.
They've had so many opportunities to trade Walker Kessler, and they haven't. And now they actually put a real team together, or a realer team. I would be very surprised.
I'd be surprised, but I think there's probably a walkaway point at some number. I don't know what that number is. And then final one here from Dub9 Raider. Thank you for the super chat. Is there any hope the Lakers could actually successfully draft using the first round picks as opposed to star chasing? Seems the best teams today build via draft.
They have. I don't know the draft well enough to identify, yes, draft this guy and it could be doable. But I do think, as an overarching point, they need to be more open towards treating picks and towards treating picks like actual human beings and players that you put on the court, as opposed to just trade ballast. Like, they need to start thinking along those lines. Like, people always talk about the Luka build in Dallas as the blueprint for how you can build a championship. And I think what gets overlooked in that a lot is they nailed their veterans minimum guy in Derek Jones Jr. Like, that's one of the best veterans minimum signings I can think of in probably the last decade. But also they had Derek Lively on a rookie scale deal, which allowed them to do some of the other building around Luka, like from a financial standpoint. And the Lakers don't often put themselves in that sort of position in a league that is, again, becoming more predicated on athleticism and speed and stuff like that. It would not kill them to have more cost-controlled players on their roster.
I agree. I was trying to pull up here Dallas's cap sheet from 2023-24 and just looking at different circumstances, different cap, different CBA, but or maybe that was I forget if that was the first year of the new CBA or whatever. But so you have Luka at $40 million, Kyrie at 38, big drop off to Tim Hardaway Jr. at 18, PJ Washington 17, Daniel Gafford 12, Maxey 11, Derek Lively 5, Josh Green 4.8, Dwight Powell 4, Exum 3, Derek Jones 2, Markieff Morris 2, Jaden Hardy 1.8. So yeah, I mean they had a lot of clear values there in Washington, Gafford, Lively, DJJ, some really nice contracts there. So I think it's tough to answer these questions in a vacuum in terms of like what's the best thing to do without knowing what pick the Lakers have, who's available there. I think there's a lot of context that goes into this, but in general, the Lakers, I think the only current player like under 24 in the rotation is Jake LaRavia, if I'm not mistaken. So they need to replenish some of the young assets and like just young talent. And obviously you don't want to like build a roster of 22-year-olds, but like it would be nice to have a couple of up and coming players that you're confident can grow into something toward the end of the decade.
The upside towards drafting in the 20s is they don't have as high of a ceiling, but they're typically more ready to start playing now. Yeah. Like not always, but often.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap here because I have to go get a root canal. I am super excited about that. Great end to trade week. But Andy, appreciate the time. If you guys are not already following Locked On Lakers, make sure to check that out on YouTube. I will make sure to put that in the show notes below. But anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
Yeah, Lakers Talk on ESPN LA 710 is weekly. The day and time often change, but it's a fun show. Jovan's been a guest multiple times. He'll be back again. Again, Locked On Lakers 5 days a week. YouTube for the sickos who like to watch, and you can also subscribe on audio. Subscribe on both. And this was a lot of fun, man. Could have kept going if not for the root canal.
This was, and I got to figure out what's going on here with my camera because it is completely spazzing out. But appreciate you guys for watching. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow night after Lakers Warriors. I will talk to you all then. Shout out to the late night gang, even though right now it's like the mid-afternoon gang. But appreciate you guys and talk to you all soon.